Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? So welcome to week 10. We have a busy schedule for the first hour. Hi, everyone. Can I ask everyone to please try to mute your screen so we don't have interruptions? And I'm recording this session so that you can review, you can revisit it, and so you don't miss any detail from the presentations today. So today we have Dr. Shital Dessai from York University in Canada to talk about designing interactions for children. This is she's going to deliver a short talk, and her PowerPoint, full PowerPoint, is available on our week 10 online folder. But the idea is that from her experience of designing and doing research for about designing interaction for children, you can take the most interesting concepts and maybe inform your project. And maybe this is also an opportunity for you to ask Shital about your ideas and see what aspects of that it's important to not miss and consider and design for when designing interactions for children. So we're going to have that in the first half an hour of today's session. And after that, we are going to have Andrew Peterson. And many of you are probably doing or are enrolled in ID4, the manufacturing technology manufacturing unit with Tim Williams. And so the idea is that those concepts from manufacturing you need to bring into the product development stage of your designs for assessment too. Not all of that, but some of it. And this is why Andrew Peterson is going to help us go through those concepts and clearly identify what is it that you need to bring into ID3 and to what extent. So again, great opportunity for question and answers, and great opportunity to tell us what would you need in terms of resources, to help this process. And then finally, we have at 2 p.m., we have the ID pilots team. We have met with him and we're discussing in what ways they can support your work towards the end of the semester and in general for the next semester. One of the areas that we have been talking about is doing an Arduino session where you can just trouble shooting session where they can help you with model making, problem solving that you may have, also with other aspects that are relevant to your final presentation for assessment too. So again, today is a really good opportunity to know them and to organize with them a different date on sessions where you could do all these things. So I'm conscious about the time, and I just would like to start with Shital. But before we do that, I would like to ask everyone, do you have any questions at this time? Anything about the work today, which is around design freeze, the work that you need to do for next week, assessment tool, etc. Anyone have a question?
Hey, just wondering when the DDR is going to be released for this semester. I mean, for this part of the semester, like the updated DDR for online mode.
Oh, I have it. I'm sorry, I've forgotten to update it, but I will do that during the session time. But don't be too worried about the specifics of the DDR. So if you look at what is described in each of the folders, week 10, week 11, week 12 for the DDR for all the weeks, I've done that in matching what is described in the DDR. So for example, in the program today, it says week 10 summary guidance for your ID3 work at home. And it talks about the types of individual model making that you can do in your team to distribute the workload for presentation. But it also says about evidence of your work should be in Arduinos, DDR, PDFs of the visualization of your illustrations. So all these items are exactly the ones that you have in the DDR. So you can use either or. But if you're working on this, that you are fulfilling the requirements of the DDR. Okay?
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
No worries. Any other question? There's a question on the chat, I think. Not yet. All right. Okay, so obviously I will be visiting the different tutorial rooms, and if there are more questions, please, I will resolve them there, or I can also stay after the first hour and have chats. But now I would like to see if we have Shital in the room. Shital, are you there? I don't think she's there yet. There it is. Hello, Shital. How are you? You are mute.
Sorry, although I've been Zooming so much, I still forget to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. How are you?
They're a quiet bunch.
We're good, thank you very much.
So let me introduce you to Dr. Shital Dessai. She is a lecturer and a researcher at the University of Georgia. Her area of expertise is interaction, product interaction design. She has a wealth of experience in industry before she engaged into being a researcher and a lecturer. She's also worked with us in the previous iterations of designing interactive products with me. So she knows very well what is what the tech task project is, because she's done that with me as well. And she changed jobs, and now she's in Canada. But it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Shital, and I really hope you take advantage of this session to ask questions, any question you may want to Shital. She knows really well the technology as well as the interactive design concepts. Okay, Shital, all yours.
Okay, thank you, Maranella. So I'm going to share my screen with the PowerPoint slides. Let me know if you don't see the slides on the screen. So give me a minute. Okay, so you should see the slides on your screen now.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I do prefer this to be more interactive. So if you have any questions, do interrupt me, and let's clarify those questions before we proceed further. So welcome everyone, good afternoon. You can see it is late over here. I still, Thursday evening for me still. So you'll see my background is a bit dark, so I apologize for that. So my name is Shital Dessai. I am a professor in interaction design at York University. I also run a research lab at York University. It is called Social and Technological Systems Lab. The primary focus of the lab is to design for children and older adults, but it is focused on human-centered design methods, participatory design methods, but I also use systems thinking methods, and you must be aware of Maranella's product ecosystems. So I have been working with children and older adults at two extreme demographic scales. Now today's talk, okay, so. Okay, I'm going to just mute my, okay, I'm going to just stop my video because I can't see my slides. Okay. Okay, so the main focus of today's talk is to introduce you to develop a better understanding of how children interact with different products and interfaces. But I'll introduce two concepts, main concepts of interaction design. One is perception and action, and the other one is embodied interactions. And embodied interactions forms the basis of children's interactions with most of the products and interfaces. And by the end of the talk, you will take a form of a tool or a model, which I refer to as embodied interaction model, which will allow you to develop embodied interactive products for children in your design projects. So the first question is like, why do we need to design for children? Why is the need to design for children? So if you look at the demographic scale, I look at children and the older adults as extreme outliers, primarily because they are mostly not included in designing mainstream products, to an extent that even when children's products are designed, for example, toys or teaching and learning products, um, uh, uh, the only people who are consulted in the design process are adults who are primarily teachers or parents or guardians or caregivers. In the last decade or so, increasingly companies like Lego have started introducing children in the design process, and they refer to it as designing with and for children. But most of the mainstream products are designed from adults' perspective rather than from children's perspective. Now, why are children not included in the design process? One of the primary reasons is it is very complex. The reason for that, and one of the reasons you can cite is as children grow or develop from birth, there are different phases, and as they go through different phases of child development, their behaviors and interactions change. And the change in interactions and behaviors inform a change in the design criteria. So for example, in my experience with designing for children and with children, I have seen three main stages in which children change their behavior and interactions. When they are born and before they start going to school. So the numbers I have on the screen for the three stages, they are in relation to the Australian education system, but in North America, the numbers may change a little bit here and there. So before they start going to school, children learn through exploratory methods. So they learn to talk and walk by learning how to fail. And through failures and through exploration, they learn new techniques. But when they start school, they are introduced to different abstract concepts, and they learn how to read and write. But then there's a lot of exploratory techniques involved. But as soon as they start going to the middle school stages, they start thinking more rationally. So, for example, if you give a new smartphone to a young child in the age group of 6 and 12, they may find different ways to get it to work. And they'll come up with new concepts and new features that you yourself don't know about your own phone. But the same phone, if it is a smartphone, when given to an older child, they may be more hesitant about exploring the phone. They may think about the consequences of interacting with the phone in a certain way. So they're more hesitant. Nothing wrong with that, but there's more rational thinking in comparison to more intuitive approach to exploring and learning the use of the phone. Now, if you're designing for children, you have to keep in mind the three stages of behavior. So you should know which age group your user as a child falls within. If you are going to design for 0+, then you need to incorporate the behaviors from all the three stages. I do recommend watching a documentary on Netflix, which is it is a series of episodes, and one of the episodes is about explained beauty. So one of the things they highlight about children is the stereotypes incorporated by some of the brand companies on the preference of colors in children. So when you're especially designing for children and older adults, you have to be very careful that you don't include those stereotypes. For example, one of the misconception is that children like bright colors. So everything that you design for children has to be bright in color. Yes, psychologists, from a psychology theory, it is true that young children or young babies, when they're a few months old, they do get attracted towards certain types of sounds and colors, but it is not a valid conception for all the age groups. Also, the misconception that pink is for girls and blue is for boys is a complete misconception in child development and child learning and psychology theory. Okay, so I'm going to pause over here for a bit and see if anybody has any questions up till now. If you wanted to discuss anything.
Chita, sometimes, you know, students, it's easier for students to drop questions on the chat. So guys, if you would like to do that, you're very welcome. Just drop questions as Chita is going through the slides, put them on the chat and she can address them.
Hello.
Hi, Maria.
How are you? Thank you, Shitai. I just wanted to ask you something because I was trying to make quick notes as you were talking. And you were saying that when designing for one of the stages, you have to take into consideration all of the stages. I missed that bit. Which stage were you referring to?
Oh, so I was referring to those age group stages. So there are 3 broad age groups when the behavior of children change. So if you are designing for a product and you say the age group is 0 and above, then you need to make sure that you incorporate the behaviors or you incorporate children within all those age groups. And you need to keep in mind that children in different age groups are going to behave differently. So you need to take into account that there'll be older children who will be more rational thinking, and the younger ones will be more exploratory in their behavior. So how do you have all these design features which allows both the age groups, the exploration as well as the rational thinking incorporated in your design?
So I am designing between 6 to 8 or 5 to 8, but I thought that I want to obviously focus on the development of and the needs for that age range. But just a quick question, can a design or a toy or an interaction, can it work for such a large range? And I'm not talking about the age range that I'm focusing on. Can an interactive product work for a kid between, I don't know, 2 years of age, 0 or whatever, to 17, like the big age range? Would it be effective? Would it even work?
Yeah, so one of the classic successful example is Lego. So all age groups are equally able to work through it. And one of the primary reasons that, you know, such a large age group is able to engage with Lego is because it is mostly the physical affordances that people have to work with, and physical affordances allows a lot of emerging behavior in the blocks. So we'll talk more about the physical affordances as we proceed further. But if you have a lot more physical affordances in your design, you should be able to cater to a larger
group. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm going to, if there are no more questions, I'm just going to go to the next slide. So when I say interaction, any interaction has 2 aspects. One is action and the corresponding response. But between that action and response, there's a lot more happening. And the basic principle of an interaction is there should be continuous perception action loops. So for example, when you see a doorknob and you go and twist the doorknob or turn the knob, how do you decide what you're going to do? So you use your sensory systems. So firstly, you will look at the doorknob and you will look at the shape of the doorknob. You will see the, how it is aligned and laid out. And you may decide, probably I'm going to touch the doorknob and see what I want to do. So you will use your sensory systems and then make a decision whether I'm going to twist the doorknob or turn the doorknob. And then when you do that, so when you are using your sensory systems to decide what action needs to be performed, it is called perception. And when you are doing perception, you're not only using the properties of the doorknob, but you're also using your previous experience of using doorknobs. But when you have very young children, they may not have that past experience of using doorknobs. Then they have to mostly rely on the physical affordances of the doorknob. So perception is all about using your past experience and previous knowledge of an object and an environment. So the doorknob may be a part of a bedroom or a living room or a big seminar hall. And that also takes into account as to if I'm in a seminar hall, the doorknobs may be different in my experience. And this perception is going to inform what action has to be performed. And when an action is performed, it is going to change the behavior of the environment and the doorknob. And a continuous perception action loop is going to ensure that you have a successful interaction. Now, when this perception action loop is placed in an environment in a real time and in the real world, human beings are going to process that perception action loop in the brain. So the brain is going to process those sensory signals, and then the body is going to perform certain actions. So when the perception action loops happen in real time and in the real world, it is termed as embodied interactions. So some of the examples of embodied interactions, one is the full body interaction. So which is very similar to playing in front of Xbox Kinect. So if you're playing a game of bowling or say a game of tennis in front of Xbox Kinect, it is an example of a full body interaction. Now there is a misconception again that, since the word embodied has the word body in it, then embodied interactions have deal with only dancing and jumping around. Only body interactions incorporate embodied interactions. So this is a misconception. Embodied interactions could also involve gestural interactions like tapping and swiping, the kind of gestures that you use in your Arduino prototyping as well. But the main criteria is that those interactions are happening in real time using sensory systems to perceive what actions have to be performed. This is another example of embodied interactions. So you could be sitting on the floor and stacking Jenga blocks one above the other. And this is all done, the decision which block is to be removed and stacked is all done in real time. It is not something which is pre-programmed in the brain that a certain block has to be removed and stacked. It is done in response to which block is loose or lighter or easy to remove from the stack. Also looking at the alignment and the layout of the stack, how it is built up. So this comes to a fact. The concept of embodiment or embodied interactions originated in cognitive science. And just a decade ago or a few years ago, the concept has been applied in human-computer interaction and in interaction design. And some of the aspects of embodied interactions or embodiment, which you could use as a designer to incorporate in your design for children, are physical affordances, perceived affordances, emergence, scaffolding, and cooperative activity. So I'm going to briefly go through what they mean and how you're going to use in your design. So I'm going to give you an example of a robot which mimics as closely as possible to a human behavior. So I'm not showing this to say that that we're going to replace human activities with robot activities, but this is to show how a human actually behaves in real time. So you can see that this human mimic is doing all the activities that a human does. It is dealing with all the affordances on its way, and it's all done in real time. It is assessing how level the floor is. It is assessing where the obstacles are. It is finding its way. You will also see the robot now climbing up the stairs. So it is going to negotiate the height of the stairs. And this is what human beings do. So none of this particular behavior is pre-programmed in the robot. And this is a characteristic of an embodied interaction. And now, in addition to physical affordances, humans also depict something called perceived affordances, which is related to one's past experience and previous knowledge. Metaphors, use of metaphors in design. And you don't want to use that in robots because of ethical reasons. Another aspect is the evolutionary aspect. So if you want your design to be more engaging, especially for children, you'll see that they don't have learning issues. They may find different ways to learn new artifacts and new interfaces very easily. The problem is, how can you keep children engaged with the product over a longer period of time? And for that, emergence is a very important feature. It taps on the evolutionary characteristics of human beings. We evolve over millions of years, but our behavior also evolves over a short period of time. So we may change our houses, we may change jobs, but we adapt to new circumstances, we adapt to new weather, we adapt to new situations. So if human beings are not challenged by new forms of adaptations in the design as well, then it is difficult to keep them engaged. So in short, if you want to keep children engaged with a particular product or an interactive product, you need to incorporate emergence, a variation in the characteristics as they interact with the product. And the last one is something called scaffolding and cooperative activity, and which is also a characteristic of every human interaction. So you can see over here, there are two children who are trying to lay out the blocks, colored blocks in a certain pattern. And to do so, they are using the blocks itself as a scaffold so that they keep the balance in place. But they're also using the help of the other person to keep the balance of the blocks. The social collaboration and scaffolding could go hand in hand. So in your haptic or tactile interactions or any gestural interactions, you should make sure that you have some form of scaffolding and cooperative activity. So finally, how do you incorporate all of these aspects of embodiment in a particular interactive product? Now, this particular model will just explain you where you'll be using these aspects. Now, this is also based on the perception action model. So if you look on the right-hand side, it is the perception section. So you can see the children perceive using cooperative activity and scaffolding, and they use affordances in the form of natural properties of the objects. They use symbolic cues or metaphors, and they may also use embodied representations, which in other words is simulation of functionalities of different objects, such as bouncing ball, etc. They also perceive from social cues, like they may imitate actions of someone with whom they are working. And once they have decided what actions have to be performed, they'll again use cooperative activity and scaffolding to act on the products and interfaces, but also act on the social world. Now, when they act on a certain object, so for example, if you squish a squishy object, it is going to change its form and structure. Similarly, when you when a child performs an action on a particular product, it may change its properties, it may change its shape or size or different characteristics or behavior in general. And that is going to result into some form of emergence. Now, if there is any change in behavior, it is going to result in new forms of cues for children to act upon. So if this particular cycle of perception and action loop is maintained without any break, it results in a successful interaction. And when a number of perception action loops have been completed, it could result in a generation of a new knowledge, and which also results and contributes to learning in children. So you can see the main criteria for an embodied interaction is successful perception action loops without any break in between, and also designing appropriate cues for children for them to easily perceive what action has to be performed on the interactive product. So in summary, what we have done today is this talk has provided you an understanding of how children go through continuous perception action loops using various aspects of embodiment, and how can you incorporate these aspects of embodiment in a continuous perception action loop to design an embodied interactive product for children. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the talk. So do you have any questions?
Shital, thank you very much for your presentation. I think the examples were very relevant, and the model is very, very useful. In terms of me translating your the principles that you have just presented to the work that the students are doing now, I can say to the students that you guys are working with tangible interactions, that your interactions have embodied aspects to it, and that things that are interesting coming from Shital's principles in relation to what our partners from the Quiz and Museum said, is that when we talk about keeping children engaged and incorporating emergence, we can think about open play, which is an aspect that you guys have been touching on and mentioning in the discussion of what you're going to do with your designs to take it forward to your assessment too. The other part that is interesting and that we haven't touched is on the social collaboration, which is what Shital refers to as scaffolding and cooperative activity. And obviously, if you place your designs in the context of the museum, there won't be a one-to-one interaction, probably because it's a public space. There will be different people and different children and, doing things. And this is an opportunity for you to see how your objects could interact with different people, or how you can have a number of objects, as a system working together with each other or reacting to each other. So that is something to consider. Then the other principle that Shital referred to, which is present in what you're doing now, is affordances, which are all the elements from the physical context. And it's not just the object in the place, but it's also how the activity that you're designing for, the purpose or the learning purpose of the interaction activity that you are designing for. So you need, if it's about making sure that children learn that the sea life would survive better in an environment where they are not touched, you have designed a number of things about that. And so you have to design the physical characteristics of the element and the elements around to make sure that that meaning is conveyed clearly to the children. There's a question? Somebody talk. Is there a question, guys? No? I think this is a moment for you guys to, have a chance of asking any further questions to Shital at this time, please drop them on the chat if you have any, or if there's any comment. Shital,
you can say if you don't agree with me as well.
there's a lot of thank you, Shital, in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I have some video links on the slides. I didn't have time to play all those videos, but feel free to watch those videos. They're very interesting examples as well, which could be useful for your projects.
Yes, Chita, thank you very much. I have taken notes, and I will, for the students, I will, everything that we just mentioned, and concise summary of how it applies to the project, I will put that into the message, the email message that I sent out today. So thank you, Chita. I'm mindful of the time, so we have to let you go. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for making the effort of being up, so late at night over there in Canada. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and being so open at the questions. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. Good luck, everyone, with your projects. I look forward to see what you come up with.
Can we say thank you to Shital, guys?
Thank you very much,
Shital. Shital, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Okay, bye, Shital.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and I'll stay with you guys because the next thing we have is Andrew Peterson presentation. So Andrew, before I give you the floor, just 1 minute. Okay, all right. So there's a number of concepts that Shital discussed today, which are higher level concepts. And I hope you were able to follow what she was trying to explain in the model. She did produce good examples, examples that are relatable, that are in terms of explaining what that embodied interaction and the affordances and the emergence and the scaffolding and cooperative activities were. So I'm going to really try to annotate them in a concise form so that you can follow them. Having said that, this is a guest lecture. It's a guest talk. It's not something that we're going to mark you against, in terms of the interaction design for assessment 2. It is content that is delivered to you to elevate and provide more depth to your understanding of interactive product design. Okay? All right. So, Andrew, all yours.
Okay. I'll try to share my screen, see how this goes. Right. Now, are you able to see the full screen slide at the moment, or is it showing the...
Yeah, we can see the full screen slide.
Yep, awesome. All right. Now, just as I get into this, Marianella, please feel free to jump in at any time. There's going to be aspects, because I'm trying to talk about integration of your ID4 unit and the manufacturing concepts into the ID3 project. And so, yeah, if there's anything which I mentioned which is slightly off track for what this project is, please correct anything I say, Marianella. We don't want to steer students the wrong direction at all. So, anyway, to kick us off, so manufacturing tech and design, sort of call this the art of making something real. There's a side track that I've been following recently online of sketching group. So Sketch a Day, Spencer Nugent has been talking about art and concept work and what the interaction is there. So just a little bit of a side play on things. But in today's talk, I have too much to talk about. So I'm actually going to fly through this very, very quickly, or attempt to. We'll have some times for questions if there is time at the end. But can I see, have you guys done much at all with the double diamond before? Has anyone heard of the concept? Nope. All right. So I'll very briefly touch on that. There's a number of different concepts that I'll talk about which there's so much more to them, but I'm just going to very briefly touch on them today. So double diamond, product lifecycle, assembly, design guidelines, manufacturing, materials, things to put in your DDR, etc. So jumping in, this is a design approach or methodology that a lot of designers use called the double diamond approach. So you start off at the beginning of the project, you diverge, you discover what's new, you do all your initial research sort of stuff. Then you converge, and that's kind of what you guys have done with your tech task and design brief. You've identified, okay, this is the core principle of what we're going ahead with. Then you're into the stage where you are now, and you're starting to diverge again. You're developing in detail. So you're exploring, okay, well, what if we include this aspect of the Arduino, and what about this material, and what about that process? And so you're still exploring a lot more again. You're kind of bringing out that knowledge base, and then you need to converge all of that back down into your final presentation. So this second part of the diamond is where you guys are sitting at the moment. Now, something which has been causing confusion for a lot of people is, oh, they keep talking about toys and things like that. Well, for the client, their double diamond is actually very different to yours. And so where we come to with our final presentations for the client, that's actually the point of sort of the extreme divergence. They're seeing a range of all of your team's concepts. So that's their exploratory divergent stage in the discovery. So that's all we're getting up to for the client. Then they'll come down and they'll work out, okay, we like this concept and we want to develop that one further. And then you get into the second diamond of further ongoing development, where you refine a lot more things, you get engineers and other people involved, and then you converge that down into your production, where they might end up with a toy, and that might be 2 years down the track. And so hopefully that just gives a bit of a visual reference as to how we as the students and the client perceive the process. And so we're not looking for you guys designing toys. We're looking for you guys to design an interactive experience for them. And that's just the start of the process for the clients. Does that all make sense and accurate, Marianella? Yep, cool. All right. Product lifecycle. So some of the stuff talked about in ID4 this week was around sustainability and the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle. So part of that can definitely flow through to this project. So consider how you can apply those things. Reduce. So how can you reduce the number of components and the complexity of your product? It's an environmental sustainability factor. With this project in particular, they're talking about things like oceans and sea life and coral reefs, and there's that whole educational aspect. And so sustainability, considering the reuse of materials, or what happens with your product from when you first manufacture. Can you use recycled materials? Can you reuse other materials from things through to its use? And then at the end of its life cycle, so at the grave, what can be then recycled again or reused in other products or other purposes? So there's that whole consideration that can be taken to there. Assemblies. This is something which is very important going forward with this project. So a lot of the concepts, so you've been working on your junk models at this stage, you've got little bits and pieces here and there, and the concepts you presented were some rough form or a concept sketch of, this is sort of what we'd like it to look like. But when you get into detailed design and manufacture, you actually need to work out how everything's going to be assembled. So where are your Arduino components going to fit? Are they going to fit in a box? Are they going to be screwed down to something? Do they fit inside something else? Are there parts of your product which there's multiple layers? And so you really need to start addressing the detail. And no product is, or very few products are actually just one part. You need to be thinking about all these different levels and different parts of the way they interact. So consider things that we were talking about during class this week about part joining. So is it going to be a permanent fitting, or is it semi-permanent? Is it removable? just for context, this project that I'm showing there on screen at the moment was my project in 2002 at uni. We built an interactive whiteboard experience. And so we didn't have Arduinos back then, but it was using existing electronics components out of a toy keyboard, wiring it up to some buttons that we integrated into our product in a different way, had lights and music and sound, and it all interacted in a fun way. So yeah, consider how you're going to fit those elements together. Design guides. A big thing we've been talking about in ManTech is the use of design guides. To quote Captain Barbosa, the code is more of what you'd call guidelines than actual rules, but you need to know what those guidelines are. And so that comes into play when you're being specific about your manufacturing. We don't want to see presentations going forwards where it's like, oh, this is molded plastic, and this is molded plastic, and this is also molded plastic. It means nothing to us. What we're looking for is more detail and being specific. So it's injection molded polypropylene, it's blow molded HDPE. Or if you go to the next level down, you can add more detail and say its color is Pantone, whatever it is. Its texture is this. It's made using an open shut tool with 2 side cores. So you can start to add in more specific information. But to know that a part is going to be blow molded, you have to be aware of the guidelines and work out, okay, well, this is the design of my product. What's the appropriate process to use? What's the appropriate material? You can start qualifying your materials and say, okay, well, we're using HDPE because it's stiff, it resists cracking, it withstands high temperatures, and it's got limited warping. And so you don't need to tell us everything about the material, but tell us the key things about why a material might be chosen for that particular task. When it comes to material selection, just a quick reference for you is to make use of material connection. So through the Qt library and this link that we've provided you, you can get access to this awesome resource. You can very quickly refine by different filters. So I want to look at particular things in sustainability or particular physical properties, and that will help you very quickly narrow down possible materials to use. When you do that though, this is the sort of information that can go in your DDR. And so, sure, do a screen grab, print it out on a piece of paper, whatever it is, but don't just include a bunch of data sheets or information about materials or processes. What you need to do and what we want to see in your DDRs is that it's there for a reason. So mark it up. So, okay, I'm looking at this particular material and I'm doing so because it's got stain resistance is really high and it's translucent material and it's got a light diffusing effect. Great, okay, highlight those particular things of that material. But, oh, maybe we actually need something more flexible. So no, this material is not going to work. So don't just show one material, but explore a range of materials. And you can then work out, okay, well, which one's going to be the best? And you annotate everything. The same goes with processes. So use your design guides, work out, okay, well, I'm looking at using this metal shape. It's a complex form, so it's going to be one of the casting processes. So design guides, okay, yeah, these are the basic rules. Okay, this one applies to this design. You annotate all that information and that goes in your DDR. That way you can look back and quickly find why on earth was I looking at that? Oh, because of this. Manufacturing techniques that you're likely to come across for this particular project. So ID4, we've been talking about things like injection molding, which is great for mass production. But when it comes to the project that we're working on ID3, we're looking at sort of one-off or very low-run production techniques at the moment. Down the line for the client in their second part of the diamond, yes, when you explore toys or things like that, mass production processes become more applicable. But for your project at this stage, we're looking at low run things. So things like silicon molding, sheet fabrication, 3D printing, investment casting, laser cutting, CNC machining. So they're sort of one-off sorts of processes. But with those, it's still important to consider the details about them. So what is the specific material or the specific type of 3D printing process? There's, even down in the workshop, there's a range. There's FFF or SLA or SLS, or different sorts of processes, and they're valid for different reasons. So don't just say something's 3D printed. Say what type of 3D printing it is and what type of material. Other things to consider would be the surface finish or even the color. So does it have a texture on it? What type of texture? Is it painted? But don't just say it's painted. What type of paint is it? Does it have vinyl stickers or some other kind of graphic on there? Is it pad printed? How do you get those different decals on there? What color is it? So use your Pantone colors to describe, rather than just saying it's blue, it's yellow. You need to be specific. A good principle to think about in terms of what processes would be to think about what's down in the QUT workshop. There's obviously more processes which are applicable than what we have in the workshop, but that's a good starting point for you to think about those sort of low run processes. Bill of materials. Now, I'm not 100% sure, Marinella, if we're requiring a bill of materials for this project.
Not as in terms of costing, but only as a part definition.
Yep.
So
cool.
How many parts, and these are subcomponentries, just to identify. For example, the electronics or the Arduino component will have to be named in there.
Yep. So here's a template which you'll see in this unit or other units as well, and it fills out a whole bunch of information. So you can put an image in, part numbers, names, quantities, manufacturing methods, tool life, all sorts of stuff. You don't need to worry about most of this table for now. Think more like what you've just done with the torch project, where you've done an exploded view in a drawing and had a parts list where it's listed, here's the different parts and their numbers, and maybe what the process is that produces that part or the material is. So that's sort of the extent. We don't need you thinking about the costing and those sorts of aspects. But we do want to see some form of a parts list.
Sorry, Andrew, just 2 seconds, I promise. In that bill of materials, because you've been talking about textures and you've been talking about materials and painting and this and that, are we putting those details in the bill of materials or just the part names, the part numbers?
So we would love you to be as specific as you can. The more specific, the better is the aim. At the minimum, you need to be identifying all the different parts that you're doing. But really, we would love to see some of these other details. So it's this material, it's made using this process. But you don't need to talk about the tool life or the number of cavities or the cost. So if you've worked out those details and you're putting them in your presentation, put them in a bill of materials like this. The bill of materials is kind of like a summary document. It's a single page summary document of your entire project. So if you have the information, put it in.
Put it there.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for the question, Maria. Can I jump in, Andrew? So in addition to the summary table, so we're using the bill of materials as a summary table in this unit because this is a new knowledge for you. But the specification about the manufacturing techniques and what you have considered in terms of color and the sustainability aspect of the product life cycle needs to go into your final report, the product design specification report. And these are that's what we call the specification. So if your product have 3 parts, one part is 3D printed or is molded, and it has to apply certain finish, then that's what you put into the specifications for that part in the report. And so that you can put it in as a description in the report, and you can put it as just naming it into the summary table or bill of materials.
Yep. You'll also notice in this image here, there's 2 different parts. There's standard parts and custom parts. And so that's the other aspect to be aware of, is that, okay, well, we're using some screws. That's just a standard part. We're using the Arduino technology. They're standard components. The custom parts are the things that you would be having made or manufactured for this particular design.
Sorry, I was muted. Can I just jump in very quickly? So in a typical bill of materials in industry, you will have all of that detail, what the material is, what the finish is, sometimes who the supplier is if you've got that information. Because bill of materials often goes with the rest of your files to manufacturers. Yep. So it's kind of the final checkoff list for your manufacturers to look over. This is the part name, the part number, this is what color we have to finish it in, this is the particular texture that we have to do it in, this is the material. It's the final, like, this is how everything has to be. And you guys are going to have a lot of that information in your spec report anyway, so you might as well put it in the bill of materials as well.
Mm. Yeah, it is a part of that spec report, really, along with your 2D drawings. And so your part numbers and names, they should all use the same part numbers and names as 2D drawings have, so that everything lines up across your project. Okay, I'll keep moving, running out of time. So I just wanted to touch on, because a big part of manufacturing technology is CAD. So very briefly touch on a range of the different uses of CAD in a project like this. And so you can start off with, sorry, skip the page. So you can start off with using CAD for simple underlays and concept development. So create a block model, something that's the right basic dimensions, and you can put it on, turn perspective on, print the screen, and you can start to sketch over the top, and it'll help with your concept sketches that it'll be accurate. If you have components, so like the torch project, we had LEDs or batteries, so some of those standard components, you can turn those on as an underlay, put them roughly in the right place, print it out, and then your sketching over the top will make sure that you are allowing space for those components to fit in. Same goes then with this project. Okay, we're doing some Arduino things. If you're trying to embed or incorporate your Arduino into a part of the model, do a quick basic block model of that, print it out, and then sketch over do your concept sketching and design development over the top of the
Oh, yep.
Sketch over the top of those.
Sorry, Andrew. We lost you there for about 30 seconds.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So this one here is just showing that use of CAD underlays. So quick concept sketches over the line work, and note that there's a template for this as well. So it's part of the DDR. So there's the logo, there's the details of that particular page, and the date from that page that it was created. You can use a CAD for 3D printing and manufacturing. So yeah, the image on the top right was a 3D printed part that was used for testing. The bottom right one is the final design. And so the same CAD files are used for communication early on, as well as then creating the physical parts. You can use it for your 2D documentation. We've been doing that with the Torch project. Do some simple orthographics and a perspective, show some section views, that sort of thing, with a few dimensions. You can also do other sorts of 2D documentation. So you can use CAD files to create like instruction or assembly guides and patent drawings and all sorts of things. That level is probably not, so instruction guides could be useful for this project for how to assemble your unit, like if it was an exhibit. But yeah, don't worry about things like patent drawings at this stage. Analysis, it's great for that. We're not going to be looking at that at all in this project, but down the line, other design units, you will have to consider that. Rendering is something that will be good to use your CAD models for. So you can create exploded views, use it for presentation, apply different materials, textures, all that sort of thing to it. The big thing with CAD is that it is really largely about communication. It's communicating helping you to communicate with your concept work, and then communicating final design intent using as renders. You can use it for animations. You can use it within virtual reality, all sorts of different ways to go. So do I have to CAD model some crazy organic sea creature for this project? It's really difficult to do. crazy organic stuff in SolidWorks. It's possible in Fusion 360, and if you get the slides for this, there's a link there to a video that shows how to use a different aspect of Fusion than we've been showing you, which is using forms, and you push and pull and shape things. It's still a bit complex. There's tools like Mudbox and Sculptress, Blender, Maya, and as students, you'll get educational access to a lot of those programs. And so if you're into sculpting and doing those sorts of things, it's a wonderful time to explore those. But the actual complex forms of the fish or sea life that you're doing, it's going to be hard to model those in detail in CAD. And so that aspect, and this is from my perspective, and Marianella, feel free to jump in, would be the actual form of the sea creature. You might be better off showing it through your concept sketches, through combinations of photoshopping images and concept work and models or that sort of thing. But we're getting you guys to do 4 different types of models, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And presentation or form, aesthetic models is one of them. And so that's where the sea creature aspect is probably going to come to the fore more, is in that model making side than the CAD side. The CAD will be great for the structural support and how your overall product fits together and assembles and different things. But the sculpted form of the sea life that you're using will probably come through more the form model than the CAD model. The Loughborough Design School a number of years ago came out with this series of images that shows different aspects of sketching and model making. So I wanted to touch briefly on these because they fit within the project in different ways. And so this range of 6 images here, so the idea sketch, study sketch, references, etc., they're fantastic things to be putting in your DDR. One thing to note about most of them is that they also have annotation beside the sketches. So it's communication of design ideas. The next set of images, so sketch rendering, prescriptive sketches, scenario and storyboards, particularly 9, 10, 11, and 12, fantastic sorts of images to use in presentations. So you're telling a storyboard of how your product is used, how kids interact with it, that sort of thing. It's great for presentation, getting across the idea of materials. Cross sections in that diagram show how physical interaction is happening between different components or parts within the design, maybe how they're fixed together, those sorts of details. So this sort of stuff goes in the DDR and in the presentations. These sorts of drawings, so perspective drawings, general arrangement, detailed drawings, and technical illustrations, they can be good within your presentations, depending on how you use it. It's all about communication. So if it's useful, include it. But these things are great for specification reports and going to that extra level of detail for manufacture. Then we jump into model making. And so here there's a range of different models. You can do your sketch models, so your quick blue foam ones, design development, functional models, operational, appearance, assembly, production, service. The higher up the number you go, the further towards the end of the project you are. So the things that we're looking at, particularly for our 4 different model types in this, we're looking at an interactive Arduino jump model, which is like this number 19, the functional model. Number 21 is the appearance model. So generally, it's a block model. It doesn't contain working parts, but it looks the goods. It looks like a finished product. The CAD model is something that we're looking for from each group, and the design detail model is kind of a combination, or it could be an aspect of either the design development model or the operational model sides of this. You're showing some particular element within your design in much greater detail. So that's my understanding, and Marianella, please feel free to jump in here as well in terms of the 4 models that we're looking for. Of the different types of models, this is sort of a good image summary of those different types.
Andrew, you are being very practical in the explanation, so that's really good. Please note that in the in Blackboard, in the tutorial, in the week 9 online and week 10 online, in the future ones, there's the list, bullet point list of the types of individual model making that you can do. Now, we're not saying that everyone have to do all of the 4 different types of model making. We make this list in consideration that some teams have 4 people, some of the teams have 3 people, some of them have even 2 people. So what you need to do today in regards to making sure that which model making you need to do, you need to chat about that with your tutor so we can help you identify what is the most appropriate for your project.
Marianella, on that, are you happy if it's a group of 3, they can choose any of these 3, or do you have a preference that they must include a functional model like the Arduino junk model, and maybe they must include something else, but then the other ones they can choose between? What's your preference?
Well, the thing is that because this is the units about interactions and experience, we have to have an interactive model, similar to what you did for assessment 1. I would have probably, it will need to be a scale depending on, what the model and the project is about. So they have to be one interactive model, and there has to be a CAD documentation, because this is the next part, which is where you show your understanding of product development. And so, and of course, an aesthetic model is important, but if I have to choose 2, it has to be the interactive and the CAD model. And then with your tutors, please discuss how the other 2 models can be incorporated, yes or no, depending on the project, how big the project is, and depending of the team as well.
Great. So as I said, some of these other ones, the assembly models, production models, they sort of come a bit later. So don't need to worry about them too much at this stage. The next page, these are also much more detailed and final stage models. Now, sure, it would be lovely to have access to the workshop at the moment and be able to create almost an appearance prototype or a systems prototype where you're integrating sort of those different levels of the functional model and the appearance all together into one of those appearance prototypes. But that's not the reality of where we are at the moment, and that's not our expectation. If you've got ability to push yourselves beyond these 4 and incorporate some of those things together, great, by all means, but that's not the expectation that we're looking for. Just a few quick reference images and that sort of thing, and some inspiration. So as you do your concept sketching and development, be thinking about the manufacture as you go. Cross sections and cutaways are wonderful ways of showing detail in your model rather than just here's the overall form. So lots of sketches like this in your development stage shows us that you're thinking about the manufacture. You see a form on the right, and it's like, well, I don't quite see how it works. Show the cross section beside it, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense now. Exploded views are also great. So not just as CAD models, but as sketches. You're exploring the basic block form of how things go together, and you work out, oh, actually, this part's not going to fit in there. I need some more space somewhere. And they tell you a lot more about the story. So once again, that manufacturing side and bring all that in, it's about communication and your design intent. And so the image of the pens, the one on the top, you can't tell even what it is. But as soon as you show an exploded view where the lid has come off, you're like, okay, that's a fountain pen. And you can start to see detail. And once again, those annotations coming in really enhance that level of communication. So we're not creating artworks, we're creating sketches which provide communication and design intent. Just some inspiration for you guys to look at, and I don't sort of want to throw you guys off on a totally different tangent for this project, but there's some really interesting aspects, and there's some alignment with this project to the concept of biomimicry. So when you get some time, have a look at this YouTube video from Janine. Some really great content there, and it might cause you to think about some different ways that your products might be able to interact or show in some form of educational aspect as well. And this is a website that I believe she refers to as well, called Ask Nature. And once again, it may just help provide you some inspiration on the side, but don't be driven by this in terms of this project. There's plenty more different things that we could talk about, but I'll leave it there for now. Yep, that's the end of the presentation. So were there any questions that we need to address right now?
I just had a question, Andrew.
Yep.
These slides, are they going to be on Blackboard?
Yep, so they should already be there in week 10. It's a large file at the moment. Sorry about that. I haven't had time to compress it. So it's about 50 megs in size. I'll try to upload a smaller version later, but you should be able to get that now.
Oh, yeah, the PDF. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Andrew, thank you very much. So once again, I've taken notes to make sure that the message in terms of what you need to do or what of these you need to apply into this your final project. Or what is specifically, what is that? You know, I'm making a list and I'll send that to you on email today. Do you have questions now? Okay, or would you like to would you prefer to take the questions to your tutorial groups?
Probably take them to the tutorial groups.
The questions. Do you have any questions at this moment, or would you like to do that in your tutorial groups?
In the tutorial groups.
Okay, yeah, I imagine. All right, so we have one more thing to finish our first hour, and this is ID pilots. Do I have ID pilots in the room?
Yes, you do.
Oh, Emily, perfect. Welcome, Emily. Can we see you?
Sure. We've also got Luke and Callum in the group as well.
Perfect. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for joining us and for waiting. We're a little bit behind our schedule, but yeah, it's been a very packed hour.
Yeah, it's all good.
So welcome once again, and the floor is yours.
Cool. Not sure if Luke's going to say anything.
Okay, I'll start. So you might remember us from last year introducing ourselves as the design pilots. We've been in touch with Marinella and your tutor team, and we'd like to kind of start putting forward some drop-in sessions for you guys, both on model making and Arduino. We've all had the change from doing your basic modeling to then going from Arduino and making a bit more. So yeah, we kind of just want to start setting up a couple of those things and giving you guys a bit of a hand there with that change. Yeah, I think that's pretty much.
So look, maybe I'm not sure how much this cohort knows about all the different things that ID Pilot do. So it might be worth to just have a quick recap of all the different activities that you are running at the moment in current conditions.
Yeah, no worries. So we've still got the sketching. We've moved the sketching events to Zoom. So we run them every Tuesday, 1:30 till 3. And it's just pretty much a community building, have some fun, take some time out kind of event. And this year we've joined forces with the other units, and we've started the Adobe session. So if you're having trouble with presentation planning, Adobe, anything like that, you guys can come along to those and we can give you a hand. We've usually got a couple of people, but we can usually take some time and actually look through the questions and any examples you want us to go through. So that's currently what we've started for this semester. We've got a bit more scope for next semester with online. So we would like to do a bit more in the model making and stuff at home if we're still here. Yeah. But yeah, ID Pilots are pretty much about team building, building the design community, and just connecting. It's a huge part of the design, and we kind of just support that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Luke. And we have a presentation coming on the first week of June that involves Arduinos, of course. Is it possible that ID Pilot help us with a session just for troubleshooting in terms of Arduino models, and maybe towards the end of May?
Yeah, for sure.
You're right. There you go, Emily.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we can definitely do that. Something I want to kind of sort out today would be when the best times would be to get these set up so we can start organizing, who's available to come to those. Yeah, so I'm not sure if, I don't know if it works to tack it on before or after one of your classes, or if there's like a free time where a lot of you guys are available.
Or it could even be in parallel to this session. So what about, let me have a sense of how people interested. Can I see some thumbs up of people interested in this session with Arduinos? Okay, I think we have about 10, 15. Would that be enough for you guys to run a session?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. And how do people feel about having a parallel drop-in session for those troubleshooting issues with Arduinos at the same time of our Friday session, or would you prefer a different one? So parallel to our ID session, is that good? Yes, no? So can I see some thumbs up?
So what do you mean parallel, like running at the exact same time, which means?
Yeah. Since you all still have to kind of wait for tutors to have the individual conversation or team conversation with the tutor, maybe you can have it, at the same time. So we know we are all in here. So just using the opportunity. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So with the Callum, Luke, and Emily, maybe one thing that would be helpful is if you could do like a little survey, and you can send me the link and I publish it with dates that are suitable for you, and with an Arduino session, and then communication, so visual communication for the presentation skills. That would be also really helpful for us.
Yep.
Yes.
I can definitely get that done today and send it straight on.
Yes. And guys, would you like to throw into the chat any other idea that you may have for engaging into ID pilots? Anything that is useful for you, helpful for you at this time, in preparation for the assessment? When you drop that in the chat. Okay, maybe not parallel. Maybe for the class session would be good. Okay, that's good.
So we are also going to be performing a session on doing presentation techniques. So how to lay out presentation boards and also create a storyline and have a good presentation flow. So that's one thing we are going to focus on, and that's not necessarily going to be specific to your unit, but in presentation techniques as a whole. So stuff that you can learn now and use moving forward into oncoming units and other units that you do. Just a overall increase in your presentation skills and what looks best, just techniques that you can use throughout to make it seem more cohesive.
That sounds great, Carlo. And I have somebody saying about a video presentation. So when we craft the storyline for a presentation, you decide how that can go into a visual or into video. So I think that's have a really good foundation for video presentation as well.
Yeah.
When was that
we
one?
can definitely put stuff of that into the presentation techniques as a whole, because more than likely stuff that works for visual presentations also works for videos. And once you have the groundwork in there, it's very easy to transfer skills between the two.
Yes, exactly right. You were saying, Luke?
Oh, I wasn't saying.
I was saying, so when is that?
Oh,
so time's still to be confirmed on that. We're just gathering up some resources from other fourth years and stuff of their presentations, what's worked very well in the past, especially from a client's perspective, what they've really engaged with and has worked well for them to help a group or individual sell their idea. So it's still to be confirmed the time of that.
Yeah.
If you look at the chat, you'll find that Emily has posted some links there, one for the design sketching page, but one for design pilots page in general on Facebook. So make sure you go and like those pages, follow them, and try to keep up to date with the things that they're doing, because there's a lot of awesome stuff that they are actually doing throughout the semester.
Yes, I can see the links. Thank you, Emily. So I'll make sure that I copy these links and put that into my summer email today. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much, ID pilots, for coming along. I'll wait for your the link for a survey in terms of the times and sessions. And Tyling, she has a question. Are you saying goodbye? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying goodbye. Thanks so much, guys.
So good.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you again. And good luck with your studies as well.
Thank you.
Now, I think we are over our 1 hour time for the lecture. We can have a 5 minutes break, and then please go into your tutorial rooms, Zoom meetings, because we need to still go and talk about design freeze, just making sure your project. And now, after you have heard from Andrew, the different aspects of how you specify your product development, now we need to really think